She only wanted to make it home after her shift, but one man's drunken heartbreak would change everything. Before sunrise, a waitress who had been ignored all her life would stand face to face with a secret even money couldn't hide. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Sofia Alvarez pushed through the heavy metal door of the diner kitchen, the smell of burned coffee clinging to her hair, the faint ache of stale grease and dish soap still woven into the sleeves of her uniform. She took a breath that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Another 10-hour shift, another night of biting her tongue, another night pretending she didn't hear the rude jokes, the under-the-breath comments, the way some customers treated her like furniture. People saw a brown-skinned young woman in a cheap apron and decided her worth in a heartbeat. They didn't see the college textbook still piled under her bed, or the tuition bill she couldn't pay, or the way her father had taught her to stand up straight even when her world bent sideways. They just saw a waitress. The diner was nearly empty at this hour, just the humming refrigerator, the tired hiss of the coffee machine, and the occasional squeak of a leather booth as a lonely night owl shifted in his seat. But then, Sofia noticed him. In the farthest booth, near the window streaked with rain, sat a man with his shoulders slumped like a broken hinge. A wet umbrella lay beside him, dripping steadily onto the checkered floor. His suit jacket was crumpled, his hair wild, his eyes red-rimmed and glossy. And in front of him, untouched, a black coffee gone cold. Sofia knew that look. She had seen it before in men who lost jobs, women who lost homes, kids who lost parents. But there was something raw about him, a kind of lostness that felt too big for a diner to hold. Her first instinct was to leave him alone, respect the boundary people always demanded. But when he lifted his head, and she saw tears in his eyes, something inside her wouldn't let her keep walking. She approached carefully. "Sir. Do you need anything?" His gaze was distant at first, unfocused, then it flicked toward her name tag. "Sofia," he read out loud, voice rough. "Pretty name." She hesitated. He reeked of whiskey, and something in his breath made her flinch. But there was no anger in his voice, no aggression, just a kind of ragged despair that seemed to pull at his bones. "Can I get you anything else?" "Something to eat?" she offered gently. He shook his head, a slow, pained motion. His hand, trembling, reached for something in his coat pocket. When he pulled it out, she saw a photograph. A woman, blonde, smiling, her arm around him. They looked perfect, rich, polished, shining like a magazine couple. But the edges of the photo were torn, and a harsh crease ran through the woman's face, splitting it like a wound. "She's with someone else," he mumbled, the words slurred and sad. "My wife. She's with someone else." Sofia felt her heart lurch, a pang of old pain stirring inside her. She knew betrayal, she had seen it up close, the way it could break a person. She wanted to say something comforting, but what words could fix that kind of damage? "I'm sorry," she whispered instead. He laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter sound. "You don't even know me." She shook her head. "Doesn't matter." For a moment, he studied her, like no one had in years. Most customers never saw Sofia. They saw her skin, her accent, the calluses on her hands, and decided she was background noise. But this man, for one fragile second, looked right into her eyes. And it scared her how much she wanted to matter, even to a stranger. He sighed, shoulders sinking lower, and she saw the way his hands shook, the way the photo trembled between his fingers. "Do you have a way to get home tonight?" she asked carefully. He blinked at her, confused. "Home? You can't stay here all night," she said gently. "And you shouldn't be alone on the street like this." He let out a harsh, miserable laugh. "No one cares if I do." "I care," she said firmly, surprising even herself. His gaze went glassy again, tears welling. He looked away, ashamed. Sofia made a decision then. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was dangerous. But she couldn't just leave him there. She had been left in bad places before, and she had sworn to herself she wouldn't become like the people who turned away. "Let me help you," she said. "I can call you a cab. Or I can walk you out. But you shouldn't go alone." He closed his eyes, breathing uneven. A long silence stretched between them, filled with the faint buzz of neon lights and the soft hiss of rain on the window. Finally, he nodded. "Okay." Sophia exhaled, steadying her own heart. She grabbed her coat from the hook behind the counter, folded her tip money into her pocket, and stepped out into the storm with him. The night air was sharp and wet, slicing through the thin fabric of her coat. She could taste the bitterness of the city, like exhaust, like burned oil, like broken dreams. But she kept moving. As they waited on the curb for a cab, he slumped against the lamppost, nearly falling. She caught his arm, steadying him, and felt the expensive fabric of his suit under her hands. It didn't fit the sadness on his face. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He hesitated, blinking as if he had to remember. "James." "Okay, James," she said, nodding. "I'll get you home safe, all right." He gave a weak laugh. "That's funny. No one has said that to me in years." A cab rolled up, headlights splitting the darkness. Sophia opened the back door and guided him inside. As she climbed in next to him, she felt the weight of the night pressing down, the memories of every time someone had looked at her with suspicion, every time someone had made her feel small for daring to help. Her heart rattled. Was she making a mistake? If anything went wrong, no one would take her side. People saw women like her as trouble, saw brown skin as dangerous, saw a waitress as unworthy of trust. But James leaned his head against the window, tears cutting through the whiskey on his cheeks, and she reminded herself, he needs someone. Right now, that's me. They drove through the city, past graffiti-splashed alleyways and shuttered shops, past the places where no one cared who was crying. She watched him from the corner of her eye, noticing the slight tremble in his jaw, the way he clutched that torn photo. It hurt to see him that way, even though he was a stranger. Because in his grief, she saw something that felt achingly familiar, the pain of being invisible, of being written off. When the cab finally stopped outside a towering glass building, James stirred, blinking in confusion. "Home," he muttered, voice raw. Sophia helped him out, holding the umbrella over his head. The doorman stepped forward, staring at her with wary suspicion. "Miss, do you belong here?" The question stung. It always did. That word belong had chased her all her life, from playgrounds to college classrooms to the cramped break room of the diner. Did she belong? Who decided? Before she could answer, James spoke up, surprising them both. "She's with me," he said firmly, a hint of steel in his broken voice. The doorman stepped aside, almost bowing. James reached for Sophia's arm, leaning on her as they crossed the polished marble floor, past gold elevators, past the faint smell of fresh-cut lilies and money. She had never been in a place so clean it sparkled. She had never been with someone who commanded that kind of instant respect. And yet, here he was, crumbling, held together by a woman no one else saw. Inside the penthouse, the city lights spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows like 1,000 tiny suns. Sophia guided James to a leather couch, helped him sit, then went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. As she placed it in his shaking hands, she noticed the framed photos lining the shelves, smiling faces, business partners, charity galas, family portraits. A life built on polish and pride. A life that was now tearing at the seams. "Thank you," he rasped, voice nearly gone. She nodded, quiet. "I should go," she said gently. "I don't want to make trouble for you." His eyes flew open, sudden panic. "No. Please. Just, stay for a minute. Please." It was the rawness in his voice that stopped her. The human truth of it. She sat on the edge of the couch, folding her hands in her lap. "All right. 1 minute." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, she felt seen, not as a waitress, not as a brown girl in an apron, but as a person. And in that gaze, she saw the fragile pieces of a man who had everything but felt like he had nothing. Sophia breathed in, steadying herself. Maybe the world only gave them this moment, maybe that was all it would be. But she wouldn't turn away. Not tonight. Sophia was used to other people's messes. That was what waiting tables felt like, balancing plates, refilling cups, sweeping away the crust of everyone's bad day. It was easier, sometimes, to pretend it didn't affect her, easier to become invisible. But now, standing in a penthouse so spotless it felt unreal, she felt the sharp sting of what she was about to do, cross a line that society had drawn for women like her long before she was born. She adjusted the strap of her worn purse, eyes scanning the glossy apartment. The lights of the city glimmered outside like a promise she couldn't cash. For one breath, she almost bolted. What was she doing here, in a stranger's home? Especially a stranger who lived like this? Nothing about this night felt safe. Nothing about it felt fair. James, slumped on the couch, let out a ragged exhale. That sound pulled her back from the door. She thought of all the ways she had been made to feel small, the teacher who had assumed she didn't understand big words, the woman at the store who once asked if she spoke English, the diner customers who called her sweetheart but wouldn't bother to learn her name. It built up over the years, a sludge of resentment that threatened to choke her sometimes. Yet here she was, choosing to help a man who had probably never worried a day in his life whether the world respected him. She moved to the kitchen, careful not to leave footprints on the polished floor. As she filled a glass with water, she caught sight of her reflection in the darkened window. Her brown skin, her tired eyes, her cheap uniform. She looked so out of place she almost laughed. No one would look at her and see a rescuer. No one would see a hero. They would see a brown-skinned waitress with no business here. But she stayed. Because his hands were still shaking, and someone had to be kind. When she handed him the glass, James gripped it so tight she thought it might crack. He took small sips, then let his head sink back against the couch cushions. The framed photo of his wife seemed to stare at him from a nearby bookshelf, and Sophia could practically feel the ache rolling off him. It reminded her of nights she had spent waiting for her father to come home from his second shift, wondering if he would make it, wondering if he was too tired to keep trying. That kind of heartbreak didn't care about your bank balance. James tried to speak, but no words came. Just a broken noise, somewhere between a sob and a sigh. Sophia set the empty glass on the table and crouched in front of him. "Hey," she said gently. "Breathe, okay? You're safe." Safe. It was a word she rarely felt herself. She was used to being second-guessed, side-eyed, spoken over. She was used to men who tested how far they could go with a girl they thought had no power. Even now, in this room, she could almost hear the voices of her managers warning her, "Don't get involved. Don't bring your problems into work. Don't expect people to believe you if something goes wrong." It made her chest burn, that quiet truth. Society only ever wanted her to be quiet. To clean up the mess, then disappear. But she refused. She would not walk away. James reached for her wrist, clumsy and trembling. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "You don't have to know tonight," she told him. "You just have to breathe." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. Then, like a child, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to her shoulder. The weight of him startled her. He was taller than her, heavy with exhaustion, smelling of whiskey and cologne, but there was something heartbreakingly small about the way he leaned on her. She stayed still, letting him rest there, steady as a stone. No one had ever leaned on her this way before. Most people assumed she was the one who needed saving, the poor brown girl with a waitress job and calloused hands. But she had learned to save herself a long time ago. And maybe that was why she could hold him up now. The rain tapped gently at the huge glass panes, a lullaby for a city that never slept. Sophia smoothed a strand of hair away from James's forehead. He didn't flinch. He didn't even seem to notice. The rawness in his face made her heart twist. No one deserved to hurt alone. "Do you want me to call someone for you?" she asked softly. He shook his head, eyes shut tight. "There's no one," he rasped. "No one I trust." The words stung her, more than they should have. She knew that feeling. She had grown up learning that trust was a dangerous gift, one that could be broken too easily. Her family had trusted landlords who raised rents, bosses who cut hours, politicians who promised help and never delivered. Her mother once told her, "Be careful who you trust, Sophia. This world doesn't see you the way you see yourself." James was proof that even men with power could be betrayed. Even men with everything could feel worthless. She pulled a blanket off the arm of the couch and draped it around his shoulders. He mumbled a thanks, voice hoarse. Then, in the quiet, he began to talk. Haltingly, like every word cost him something. She lied to me," he said, staring at the far wall. "She said she loved me. She. His breathing went ragged. Sophia reached out, placing her hand lightly over his. The contact made him pause, as if remembering he wasn't alone. "It's not your fault," she told him, even though she barely knew the story. It felt true, somehow. Like a kindness she would want someone to offer her, if the tables were turned. James nodded again, eyes glazed. Then he fell silent, breathing steadier now. He sagged back against the couch, clutching the photo to his chest. Sophia let herself stand. Her knees ached from crouching, but she didn't complain. She checked her phone, almost 4 a.m. If she left now, she might still get a few hours of sleep before another long day. But every time she moved toward the door, James's eyes would flutter open, scared, pleading. So she stayed. The resentment simmered beneath her ribs, sharp and familiar. This world did not give girls like her time to rest, time to dream, time to simply be. She was always working, always defending her worth, always carrying someone else's weight. And now, she was carrying his too. But even in that unfairness, there was something beautiful. For once, she was needed. She pulled a chair closer to the couch and sat, letting her eyes drift toward the skyline. The buildings glittered against the night, unaware of heartbreak, unaware of the way a woman like Sophia had to claw for every scrap of respect. Out there, she was just another brown-skinned girl serving cheap coffee. But here, for this single night, she was the only person standing between a broken man and the darkness. Sleep tugged at her thoughts. She fought it off. Someone had to be awake. Someone had to care. And if the world wasn't going to do it, she would. They told her to stay in her place. But one act of compassion made her a target, and the system was ready to crush her for it. Stay with this story, because sometimes the worst betrayal comes from the rules themselves. Morning broke with a thin, colorless light that felt more like an interrogation lamp than a sunrise. Sophia's eyelids burned from the weight of exhaustion, but she refused to close them. She couldn't. Too many times, she'd seen what happened when she let down her guard. People who looked like her didn't get to fall asleep in safety, not in a country that would gladly pretend they didn't exist. James was still asleep on the couch, breathing softly, his face slack with relief, as if the night's confessions had finally broken the tightness in his chest. Sophia rose from the chair, quietly stretching her sore legs. She needed to go home. She needed to change before her next shift. But something in her refused to leave him like that, vulnerable and alone. So she waited, long enough to see that he would wake up okay. Just after 8, the heavy glass doors of the penthouse opened without warning. 2 sharply dressed security men swept inside, their eyes locking on Sophia like a pair of hunting dogs. Their voices were cold, professional, polished in that way she'd come to hate. "Ma'am," one of them began, "you need to come with us." Sophia's spine went stiff. 1,000 fears crowded her mind, all clawing to get out. "Why?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. The taller guard stepped closer, a tablet in his hand, showing her image on security footage from the night before. You were seen bringing Mr. Wentworth home. Our protocol requires verification of your identity. She swallowed hard. Verification. That word always carried a blade. Like the time her own bank had frozen her account because they couldn't verify her Latina-sounding name. Like the time her cousin got detained at an airport for extra screening, no reason other than a surname that didn't sound safe enough. Verification was never gentle. James, still groggy, sat up on the couch. Leave her alone, he snapped, voice raw but commanding. She's with me. The men hesitated, clearly torn between their orders and his authority. Sophia stepped back, resentment prickling under her skin. Was she really that suspicious, that threatening? A waitress with a battered purse and a broken phone? But this was how the world saw her, as a problem. As someone to question. As someone who didn't belong. Sir, we have to document her presence, the taller guard insisted. Standard safety protocol. James looked like he might collapse all over again. She saved my life last night, he said hoarsely. Write that down. Sophia tried to speak, but the shame was a fist in her throat. So many times, she'd told herself to be strong, to fight back, to never let people make her feel small. But in that moment, every ounce of strength seemed to drain from her. The polished floors, the expensive suits, the gleaming walls, none of it belonged to her world. She felt like an intruder, a trespasser, no matter what kindness she had given. One guard made a call on his radio. Within minutes, a police officer arrived, crisp uniform and an expression set like stone. It was the kind of presence that made Sophia's stomach clench. Nothing good ever came from uniforms asking questions of brown-skinned girls. Nothing good at all. Ma'am, the officer began, I need to verify what happened here last night. Do you have identification? Sophia handed over her driver's license, hands shaking. The officer barely glanced at it before turning back to James. Sir, do you confirm she is here with your permission? James nodded. Yes. The officer still looked skeptical. We have to follow up, given that an unauthorized guest was present overnight. Unauthorized. Another word that made her want to scream. It felt like an accusation baked right into its syllables. James sat up straighter. She did nothing wrong. The officer sighed, writing something down. It's procedure. Don't take it personally. But how could she not take it personally? Sophia felt every hidden insult, every suspicion, every subtle rejection crash over her in a wave. It was the same unfairness she'd been surviving since she was a kid, from the welfare office lines where her mother was treated like a thief, to the school where teachers kept her in remedial classes until she proved herself 10 times over. It was the same ache, the same rot in the system, and it never seemed to change. James reached for her hand. Don't leave, he whispered. Please. Part of her wanted to run, to get away from all of it. But the other part, the part that still believed there was good in this broken world, stayed rooted in place. James needed her, and even if society couldn't see her worth, he did, at least for now. The officer made a few more notes, then left with a stiff nod. The guards retreated as well, leaving behind a silence so heavy Sophia felt like she might sink through the marble floor. James let out a breath that seemed to empty every last bit of fight from him. I'm sorry, he said. They think they're protecting me. Sophia nodded, but her chest burned. Protecting him from her, a woman who had shown nothing but kindness. That was what stung the most. She stepped back toward the kitchen island, gathering her courage. I should go, she said. You don't need me here. Don't, he pleaded. I don't know how to face her alone. Sophia paused, heart twisting. She knew what it was to fear a conversation, to fear the truth. She had seen that terror in her father's face the night he told them he couldn't pay the bills anymore. She had seen it in neighbors facing eviction notices. America had taught her fear could live in anyone, rich or poor, no matter how high the tower. James's phone rang suddenly, slicing through the quiet. He stared at it like it might bite him. "It's her," he said, voice cracking. "My wife." Sophia felt a chill run through her. The emotional twist was sharper than she expected. After everything, now he would have to face her, the woman who had shattered him. He answered with a trembling hand. "Hello." The voice on the other end was calm, polite, almost cruel in its careful tone. Sophia could hear only his side. "You're coming home," he repeated, stunned. "When?" He looked at Sophia, eyes wide, desperate. "She's on her way," he whispered, like a child confessing a broken vase. Panic squeezed Sophia's chest. What would this wife think, seeing a strange woman here? Another twist, another way the world would paint her as the problem. As if she had lured him. As if she was the reason he had broken down. Sophia straightened her shoulders. No. She wouldn't let shame chase her out. Not this time. James lowered the phone, pale and shaking. "Please. Stay. Help me talk to her." And against every warning bell screaming in her head, Sophia nodded. Because she would not let the world's suspicion define her. Not tonight. Not ever. What if the woman who destroyed his heart returned to finish the job? And what if the only shield he had left was a waitress society refused to respect? Watch to the end, because some truths don't stay hidden. The air seemed to freeze the second the elevator doors slid open. Sophia felt every muscle lock in her shoulders as she saw a tall, elegant woman step into the marble entryway. Her hair was sleek, makeup flawless, clothes draped in a way only true wealth could afford. This was James's wife. And she looked every inch the picture of untouchable grace. Sophia felt like she'd been dropped into the wrong painting. The waitress with threadbare shoes and a rumpled coat, standing on a floor so clean you could eat off it. The wife's eyes swept over her like she was barely worth seeing, and that burned deep. For one heartbeat, Sophia nearly stepped back. She could feel all the old fears rise. What right did she have to be here? What would people assume? But then she remembered James's voice trembling, asking her to stay, to help him face this moment. She wouldn't abandon him now. The woman set down her expensive handbag and glanced sharply at James, whose hands were shaking like a child's. "James," she said, with cool politeness that made Sophia's skin crawl. "You look terrible." He swallowed hard. "Claire, we need to talk." Her eyes flicked again to Sophia. "Who is this?" James hesitated, breath rattling. "She helped me last night." Claire's brows rose. "Helped you? With what, exactly?" Sophia felt her gut twist. She'd been judged all her life for where she came from, for how she spoke, for the color of her skin. And here, again, that judgment landed like a slap. Claire's voice was sweet on the surface but dipped in poison. As if helping could only mean something shameful. Sophia lifted her chin, refusing to shrink. "He was unwell," she explained calmly. "I got him home safely." Claire's painted lips curved in something like a smirk. "How generous of you." James flinched at the sarcasm. "Claire, please. Don't do this." "Don't do what?" she snapped. "Don't question why you brought some waitress into our home." Sophia felt those words like knives, slicing clean through her resolve. Some waitress. That was all she'd ever be to people like this. No matter her good deeds, no matter her sacrifice, society would always see her as less. She thought about her mother, who'd spent a lifetime scrubbing other people's floors, about neighbors who'd been turned away from banks or landlords just because their Spanish names looked suspicious. Sophia was carrying all of them in this moment, and she refused to bow. "I'm not here to take anything from you," she said, voice firm. "I only wanted to help." Claire ignored her and turned back to James. "We'll discuss this privately." No, he blurted, panic tightening his words. We'll talk now. All of us. Claire blinked, shocked. Excuse me. James forced himself to stand straighter, though Sophia could see him trembling. She deserves to hear it. Because she's the only person who told me the truth. For a moment, no one breathed. Then James stepped closer to Claire, voice cracking with grief and anger. I saw the photos. You lied to me. You lied, Claire. Her expression didn't change. It was almost frightening, how easily she stayed calm. James, you're tired. You don't know what you saw. He shook his head. Don't gaslight me. Don't you dare. Sophia's heart pounded. The word gaslight felt huge, dangerous, a truth that couldn't be stuffed back in its box. The air in the room shifted, like a storm about to break. Claire crossed her arms, as if bored. You want to have this out? Fine. I was with him. And why shouldn't I be? James flinched like he'd been slapped. Why, he pleaded. Why, Claire? She tilted her head, eyes glinting. Because you were weak, James. Always so desperate to be loved, you'd rather drown than fight for your own dignity. The cruelty in her voice made Sophia's stomach turn. It was so cold, so deliberate. And the way she tossed those words out, so certain of her power, reminded Sophia of every person who had ever tried to break her spirit. Teachers. Bosses. Even some police officers. They all had that same tone, you do not matter. James swayed, one hand pressed to his temple. Claire, I trusted you. She shrugged. That was your first mistake. The silence afterward felt bottomless. Sophia wanted to look away but couldn't. This was the raw truth, ugly and final, and James was crumbling under the weight of it. Slowly, he sank back onto the couch, head in his hands. Claire watched him with detached disgust, then turned toward the elevator as if the conversation bored her. That's it? Sophia found herself blurting. You hurt him, and you just walk away. Claire paused, her voice dripping with ice. Don't lecture me, dear. You don't know anything about our world. Sophia's fists clenched at her sides. No, I guess I don't. But I know about respect. And kindness. And loyalty. Claire's lip curled, but she said nothing, pressing the elevator button with a manicured finger. Sophia burned with resentment, how easily people like Claire could sweep lives aside, as if they were dishes left to dry. And she felt every ounce of the unfairness that had followed her from childhood, being made to feel unworthy, disposable, replaceable. The elevator doors slid closed behind Claire, swallowing her up, leaving only silence. James stayed frozen on the couch, shoulders heaving. Sophia moved toward him, trying to gather her thoughts. I'm sorry, she murmured. I shouldn't have spoken up. James looked up, red-eyed. No. Thank you. They sat together in the quiet for what felt like hours. The skyscrapers outside glowed gold in the dawn, so pretty it hurt. Sophia tried to steady her breathing, her mind racing through everything that had just happened. How easily Claire had dismissed them both. How quickly the world had been ready to believe Sophia was the problem. She felt her resentment simmer all over again, a fire deep in her chest. No matter what she did, no matter how she tried to help, she would never be enough for some people. It was like an iron wall she could never climb. But still, she wasn't going to let it break her. James shifted, voice so soft she almost missed it. Will you stay for a while? She hesitated. There was risk in every second she spent here. But when she looked at him, hunched and hollow, she knew what she had to do. Yes, she said quietly. I'll stay. A new kind of quiet fell over the room, a fragile, painful peace. Maybe it wouldn't last. But for now, it was enough. But stay with this story, because what happens next will change everything Sophia thought she understood about trust, love, and the true price of standing up for what's right. Sometimes the world punishes the kind. But what if one brave woman refused to break, and changed everything instead? Watch until the final moment, because her courage could transform a life. They didn't speak much for a long while after Claire left. James looked like the last piece of him had been carved out and tossed away, hollow as a broken bell. Sophia sat beside him, hands folded, feeling the full weight of where she was, a woman from a family no one ever gave the benefit of the doubt, sitting in a billionaire's penthouse, being asked to stay. It was enough to make her chest ache. The resentment had grown roots inside her by now, an ache so deep she almost couldn't separate it from her heartbeat. All her life, society had told her exactly where to stand. It told her to stand behind, to stand silent, to never dare to stand up. But somehow, by refusing to leave James alone, she had broken every rule that tried to keep her small. James broke the silence first. "Do you think I'm a fool?" She hesitated. "I think you trusted someone who didn't deserve it." He closed his eyes. "And you? You barely know me, and you helped anyway." A sad smile tugged at her lips. "Because I know what it's like to have no one." James nodded, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry for what you've had to carry." She looked away, swallowing hard. No one ever apologized to her for that. No one had ever even acknowledged it. And for a moment, it felt like a crack of sunlight through a boarded-up window. They talked for hours, gently, carefully, about what came next. Lawyers. Papers. A future that looked nothing like the one he'd built with Claire. And somewhere in those quiet conversations, Sophia realized she had a say, that her voice mattered here. It felt dangerous, and yet so right. Later, James's advisors began to arrive, suits and briefcases in tow. The moment they saw Sophia, their eyes shifted, subtle but sharp. A few side glances, an arched brow, a dismissive sigh. She felt it all, the old sting of "you don't belong." But she held her head high. She refused to shrink. One lawyer tried to gently steer James into a private conversation. "Sir, perhaps we could talk alone." James shook his head. "No. She stays." The lawyer hesitated, eyes darting back to Sophia as if trying to decode what spell she had worked on James. She wanted to laugh at how impossible her presence must have looked to them, a brown-skinned waitress in this polished empire. It was as though every dollar on the table accused her of being a thief just for standing there. Resentment burned in her. Why did people look at her and assume she had bad intentions? Why did they believe someone like her couldn't be kind without an angle? It was exhausting, the constant proving, the endless performance just to be treated as human. She thought of her mother again, of the way people looked down on her even as she worked 2 jobs and raised 3 kids. She thought of her brother being pulled over just because of a taillight, treated like a threat before he even opened his mouth. It was all the same rot, different uniforms. The sickness in the system that never stopped spreading. James glanced her way, as if sensing her thoughts. "You okay?" Sophia nodded. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. She was tired. Tired of fighting for every scrap of respect. Tired of standing alone in rooms where no one believed in her. And tired of wondering if it would ever change. An unexpected knock echoed through the penthouse. Sophia startled, her nerves already strung tight. A new woman entered, older, dignified, with a kind of quiet authority. She introduced herself as a mediator sent to help James through the separation process. But when she saw Sophia, there was no judgment in her eyes, only curiosity. "Is this the woman who helped you?" she asked gently. James nodded. "Yes." The mediator gave Sophia a small, respectful nod, and it stunned her. That nod, so simple, felt like permission to exist. It felt like being seen. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes and blinked them away quickly. One kind gesture shouldn't feel so rare, but it did. The next hours blurred. James signed papers, made calls, negotiated details Sophia could barely follow. Through it all, he kept checking that she was okay, that she had water, that no one spoke down to her. Each small defense of her dignity felt like a tiny revolution. By nightfall, James's world had cracked wide open. And through those cracks, Sophia had stepped in, reminding him what it meant to have someone stand by you without asking for anything in return. Maybe that was why, after everyone left, he turned to her with eyes full of something like hope. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted. "But I'd like you to be part of it." Sophia felt the earth tilt under her feet. Part of her wanted to flee. Part of her wanted to believe he meant it. But all of her was afraid. Afraid of letting her guard down. Afraid of believing the world might let her matter. "Why me?" she asked softly. James reached for her hand. "Because you saw me when no one else did. And you reminded me to see myself." Her throat felt too tight to answer. So she only nodded. He smiled. "Would you consider working for the foundation I want to build? To help people like you once helped me?" Sophia's chest squeezed. It was too big to process. A chance to do something that mattered, that really mattered. But what if it was another trap? Another way for someone to use her? She looked into his eyes. There was no pity there, only gratitude. "Maybe," she said carefully. "Let me think." He nodded, not pushing, just holding space for her decision. And that felt like more respect than anyone had given her in years. Night settled over the city, painting the skyline with deep blues and silvers. Sophia felt the ache in her bones, the exhaustion in her soul. But she also felt something new, a fragile, bright spark. Maybe the world would never stop trying to crush her. But tonight, she had proof that one act of compassion could change everything. She stood up, ready to leave. "Thank you," she told him. "For seeing me." James shook his head. "No, Sophia. Thank you for saving me." She stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut with a gentle hush. As the car descended, she let the tears fall. Quiet, grateful tears. Because no matter what happened tomorrow, she had changed something tonight. If you believe one person's kindness can break through even the coldest hearts, share this story, and subscribe for more tales that remind us what it means to be human.